I knew Cammo House in 1969 before it was burned down by vandals, and for a brief moment back then, I touched the end of an era and a way of life. At around 3 AM on a cold, clear night during 1969, a telephone call to the West End police station in Edinburgh was made by Percy Tennant, who was reporting lights and suspicious noises coming from his house in the woods of Cammo Estate. I'd met Percy before. He was about 80 years old, almost bent double, and he spoke with a crackly voice. He now lived in the old farm cottage near to the main house, where I had to meet him in the driveway leading up to Cammo House, which was somewhere in the woods. I had heard all the stories about Percy Tennant, the grand events that had taken place at the house in the latter part of the 19th century when he'd been a young boy, how his brother had apparently left for America, and the mother, broken-hearted, had lost the will to maintain herself and the house. Over the years, for whatever reasons, Cammo House started to disintegrate and it became uninhabited. Percy had moved to the farmhouse in his old age for company and care. As in most cases, the story became tinged with the supernatural, and his mother was supposed to be buried on the estate and her ghost now walked the lawns at night. Also, there was the story about the howling and barking of dogs in the darkness. I slowly walked up the driveway towards Cammo House, and I saw old Percy as he stood at the rickety entrance gate with his leery lamp swinging in the wind, the yellow glow lighting up his thin, pointed face. He looked like wee Willie Winkie, but he was real. I was avalanched by about 30 crazy dogs, of terrier size, as they set about trying to tear off my trouser legs at the ankles, with Percy jumping around like a demented demon, shouting and screaming at them, "Don't mind the doggies, Constable! They think you're an intruder." The front of the house was impressive and the walls were very high. The view down from the front spread across a huge lawn which extended into a long grass driveway with a view of Edinburgh through the trees. I imagined the turn of the 20th century, with servants, party frocks, horse-drawn carriages, and much laughter as the guests arrived through the gates and up the driveway. Now it still stood majestic in the moonlight amidst the same trees as it did back then, all serving as an exquisite backdrop. I stared at Percy under the yellow light of his lamp. He was a strange old man. He gestured to the back of the house, and we, dogs and all, forced our way through the undergrowth to the backyard. Percy fought with the door to open it while I kept staring in every direction as I scoured the area for his mother. The door finally opened and we all stepped up. A step, I thought, and a strange feeling underfoot. I shone the torch down and saw dog excrement all over the floor, generations of dog excrement, which had piled up about 6 inches high, and although it was hard, all the new stuff was white with mould. Percy was using the dogs to guard the property and allowing them to live and roam free in the house at night. We'd entered into what appeared to be the staff quarters, for I could see the staff bell system still on the back hall wall. As we walked through the house, I saw old, faded and damp-encrusted paintings, rotting decor, a staircase, and worse, no electricity. Through the gloom, Percy led me upstairs, and gesturing, he said, "Stay to the side, sonny, avoid the middle of the floors." I hugged the old flaky walls and shone my torch at the dogs, who were puffing and panting as they ran alongside. Percy led on, his thin frame and nightshirt illuminated by the yellow glow from his paraffin lamp. Finally we reached the main room upstairs, and filled with paintings and old furniture. All the chairs had their springs up through the cloth, rotted by dog urine, and the furnishings were yellow and discoloured. I shone my torch around. Suddenly I jumped back against the wall as I realised the middle of the floor was missing, and was in fact downstairs in the room below. appeared through the dark hole, and at that point I developed a distinct weakness at the knees and an acute inability to walk or even move. Percy was jumping around on the solid parts of the floor, which he obviously knew, and gesturing at empty spaces where the thieves had stolen paintings from the walls. I decided to retrace my steps very carefully. Downstairs, I took the theft report and left him standing in the middle of the grounds, surrounded by his dogs, yellow lamps swinging, the glow on his face, the full moon over the house, and somewhere the old lady was watching it all. My heart went out for Percy. I still see him today, a man trapped in time, dreaming of the regal days at Cammo. He died, and the National Trust took over the estate and the house. At that time, vandals set fire to it, and it remains in ruins along with a deserted farm cottage where Percy had spent his last days. I revisited the Cammo Estate in 2010 and discovered that the grounds had been turned into a country park used by tourists, dog walkers and families out for a picnic. The walkways had been tidied up and the main entrance driveway had been refurbished and was a great deal wider. Cammo House was in ruins and the collapsed walls were covered over with soil and grass. The ruins seemed so small and failed to provide any guidance as to the actual size of the original building, which had been substantial. The farmhouse where Percy had spent his last days was now derelict and overgrown with trees and bushes. It was in a sorry state and now a pale imitation of the building it once was. I looked at the boarded up window where he had once stood and waved to me as I entered the courtyard. I could still see him as I did one summer's day over 40 years ago. And I admit, it was poignant. I was touched with sadness for what he had endured in the downfall of such a beautiful place. Has the soul of Percy found peace at last and moved on, or has the story become embellished? Perhaps Percy has found his mother. Perhaps when there's a full moon, you'll be able to see them walking in the grounds, hopefully without those dogs.